In the spotlight of Prejudice, a true artist finds their voice. Witness a tale of hidden talent, daring defiance, and a legend born from a cruel joke. Hey everyone, let's see the diva's son embarrass himself. Harrison Reed's shrill laughter echoed through the auditorium as other teenagers looked at each other with malicious smiles. On stage, the spotlights created an island of cruel light where Julian Vance, 16, waited alone, facing an audience of pale faces and mocking smiles. Westmore Academy was the kind of private school where rich teenagers flaunted powerful last names and even bigger egos, a place where students drove luxury cars and competed to see who could throw the next extravagant party. Julian was the school's charity project, a black kid from Oakland who had won a full scholarship while his mother, Seraphina Vance, a soul music superstar, toured the world. "The microphone is on, Mr. Vance," Principal Sarah Davies smiled with false warmth. "Since you insisted on participating in the talent show, we're all eager to see what you've prepared." The audience snickered. Everyone knew Julian had never volunteered. Harrison and his friends had forged his signature on the form as part of an elaborate humiliation. "Let's see if talent runs in the family," they had said in the hallways. Julian had never sung in public. In fact, he made a point of hiding any association with his mother's career, not out of shame. Seraphina Vance was a force of nature who had won 5 Grammys, but out of exhaustion from always being reduced to the son of the famous singer. Since arriving at Westmore 6 months ago, he had lived in the shadow of that label, even as he killed himself studying to prove his worth. It was strange how no one seemed to remember that his mother was black when they asked for selfies or concert tickets, but when they wanted to belittle him, suddenly the color of his skin became the perfect target for jokes disguised as friendly banter. "We're waiting, Julian," insisted Principal Davies, drumming her fingers. "Or are you going to give up?" He could feel the weight of the stares. He could practically touch the expectation of failure that filled the air. At the back of the audience, he saw Harrison and his friends with their cell phones ready to capture his embarrassment and turn it into the next humiliating viral video. "I don't have anything prepared," Julian said, his voice low but firm. "What a shame," the principal replied with a theatrical sigh. "Maybe next time." "But I can make something up," he finished. A sudden silence fell over the auditorium. From her seat in the front row, the music teacher, Ms. Elena Costa, looked at him with an unreadable expression. Just a week earlier, she had found him alone in the music room after school, humming softly to himself as he read a history book. He hadn't known she was there until he heard the sound of sheet music falling to the floor. "You don't have to do this," Ms. Costa said now quietly. She was the only person at that school who really knew him. Julian took a deep breath. There were 2 options: walk off that stage defeated, or show a part of himself he had always kept hidden. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling something burn in his chest, not just anger, but a quiet determination. He knew that feeling. "Actually, I'm going to sing something my mom wrote," he announced with a calmness that surprised even himself. "But she never recorded it or showed it to anyone." A murmur of surprise rippled through the auditorium, even the cruelest were intrigued. An unreleased song by Seraphina Vance? That was worth sharing. What no one at Westmore Academy knew was that before Seraphina became famous, before the Grammys and sold-out concerts, she was just a single mother singing lullabies to her son in a small apartment in Oakland. Julian had grown up not only listening to her voice but learning from it. As he adjusted the microphone, his eyes met Harrison's, who was still smiling mockingly, but there was something in Julian's calm, determined gaze that made the bully's smile falter briefly. If this story of prejudice and public humiliation touched you in any way, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out what happens when we underestimate someone based solely on prejudice, and how a moment created to destroy can become the catalyst for a turnaround that no one will ever forget. What are you waiting for, Vance? Maybe you need your mommy to sing for you. Harrison shouted, prompting another wave of laughter. Julian closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper into the microphone. "This song is called Invisible Roots." And then he sang. The first note came out shaky, but quickly found its footing. It was a soulful ballad with traces of jazz, the kind of song that demanded vocal control and emotional depth. Julian's voice, contrary to everyone's expectations, was not only in tune, it was extraordinary, deep and rich, with a timbre that seemed impossible for someone his age. In the third row, Harrison blinked in confusion. This wasn't in the script. The planned humiliation was turning into something completely different. Julian sang about roots growing beneath the concrete, invisible but powerful. About carrying the history of his ancestors in his blood. About staying whole in a world that tries to tear you apart. Every word, every note, seemed to strip away layers of a carefully constructed persona. In the front row, Miss Costa watched with teary eyes. She had witnessed something rare in that music room last week, not just raw talent, but the discipline that only comes with years of dedicated practice. After the sheet music fell to the floor, she asked him why he hid that voice. "Because I don't want to be the kid singing his mom's songs," Julian had replied, shrugging his shoulders. "And I don't want to be the diversity project who sings. I want to be respected for more than my last name or the color of my skin." Ms. Costa knew exactly what he meant. As a Latina pianist who had left the stage to teach, she knew well the weight of labels and expectations. "But to deny your talent is to deny part of who you are," she said then. Now, as Julian's voice filled the auditorium, Ms. Costa realized that he had finally understood that lesson too. Too late, she noticed Harrison sneaking out the side of the auditorium, whispering with two friends, all of them wearing smirks. The song reached a brief interlude, and Julian opened his eyes. Some students had stopped filming, others looked genuinely impressed. Principal Davies frowned, clearly recalculating her opinion of the charity project. That's when the sabotage began. The stage lights began to flicker frantically. On the sound system, a high-pitched feedback caught through the air. Someone had broken into the technical booth. Julian hesitated, missing a note, but didn't stop. When the sound returned, a heavy, jarring electronic beat was superimposed over his voice through the PA system. Harrison's friends were clearly trying to turn his performance into a joke again. The audience looked confused at the stage. Some laughed, thinking the interference was part of the performance. Others began to whisper, realizing the sabotage. Principal Davies stood up to intervene, but before she could do so, something unexpected happened. Julian adjusted his voice. Instead of fighting the intrusive electronic beat, he incorporated it, modifying the rhythm of the song and transforming the disturbance into music. Years of watching his mother improvise at rehearsals and concerts had taught him to turn accidents into opportunities. The expressions on Harrison and his friends' faces changed from malicious satisfaction to disappointment. The audience, which seconds earlier had seemed ready to witness a disaster, now watched a true musical tour de force. The students who were still filming began to sway to the music. Some raised their cell phones with the flashlights on, as if at a real concert. The song now had a life of its own, greater than the intention to humiliate that had provoked it. When the song ended, the silence that followed lasted only 2 seconds before an explosion of applause. It wasn't polite or forced applause, it was genuine, spontaneous, surprised. A boy in the front row, Thomas, heir to a real estate fortune and normally a loyal ally of Harrison's, was the first to stand up in a standing ovation. Others followed. Harrison remained seated, his arms crossed, his face contorted into a bitter expression. His gaze said it all, "This isn't over." Backstage, after the applause, Ms. Costa found Julian trembling slightly, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "You knew they would try something like that, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Julian nodded. "Harrison had already mentioned preparing a surprise for my performance. That's why I chose that song. My mother wrote it so I could improvise and adapt it depending on the audience. And you knew it so well that you were able to get around the sabotage," Ms. Costa added admiringly. "They completely underestimated you." "They always underestimate me," Julian replied with a half smile. "Is that why you decided to perform, even though you knew about the trap? To prove a point?" Julian hesitated. "Not exactly. Singing was never my plan. But last night, after I found out about the forged application, I got an email. He paused, as if deciding whether to continue. An email from Berklee College of Music in Boston. A scholarship program for exceptional talent. My mother sent them a recording of me singing without telling me. The teacher raised her eyebrows in surprise. That's one of the best music schools in the country. And they want a live performance? An audition next week? Julian ran his hand over his face. Can you believe my own mother never told me she thought I was good enough? Ms. Costa held his shoulder gently. Sometimes parents see potential we don't see in ourselves. The moment was interrupted by a group of students entering the dressing room, all wanting to talk to Julian. Between compliments and questions about his mother, few noticed Harrison standing in the doorway, his gaze cold and calculating. He was typing furiously on his cell phone. Enjoy the moment, Harrison whispered when he finally managed to get past Julian. I've made sure it will be brief. There was something in his voice, a disturbing confidence that made Julian feel a chill. Whatever Harrison was planning was worse than flashing lights or interference in the sound system. That night, as he returned to his dorm room on campus, Julian received a notification. Someone had posted a video of his performance on the school's social media. It wasn't just the video, it was the comments below. The first, from an anonymous account, read, "Find out the truth about Julian Vance's talent and why his mother keeps him hidden from the public." Link in the comments. It was just the beginning. The next morning, Julian's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Notifications flooded his screen, messages, comments, shares. The video Harrison had posted wasn't just of the performance, it was a malicious montage that interspersed Julian singing with old clips of Seraphina Vance, his mother, suggesting that he was just imitating her and had no talent of his own. The caption was devastating, exclusive. Why does diva Seraphina Vance hide her son from the stage? Sources confirm that he was rejected by every record label for lack of originality. Sad fake talent charity project. Julian felt his stomach sink. It wasn't the first time they had tried to put him down, but never so publicly and cruelly. Ignoring my calls now? His mother's voice echoed when he finally answered. Seraphina Vance was many things, an international superstar, an incredibly busy single mother, but she was never one to tolerate injustice. I just saw that garbage you posted. I'm getting the first flight home. Mom, no! Julian protested. That'll just make things worse. Harrison will love to turn this into even more drama. There was a moment of silence on the line. You're right, Seraphina finally said. That's your story to tell, but let me help you in other ways. In his dorm room, Julian stared at the ceiling. Next to him, his roommate, Liam Brooks, a quiet kid from Chicago with whom he barely exchanged words, surprisingly offered his help. My dad's a defamation lawyer, Liam said without looking up from his laptop. And I know a little about digital tracking. Julian looked at him puzzled. Since when do you care? Liam finally looked up. Since I heard you sing yesterday. And since I saw what they did afterward. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. In the music room, Ms. Costa was also mounting her own offensive. As advisor to the student newspaper, she had privileged access. Look at this, she said, showing Julian a folder of files on her computer. I've been recording all the student council meetings for the last 3 years for transcription. Guess who's always talking in the files? Harrison's voice discussed openly how he was manipulating the disciplinary committee, grades, even previous cases of bullying against other scholarship students. It was an unwitting confession of a systematic pattern. This is pure gold, Julian hesitated. Pure gold, Ms. Costa finished. We just need the right moment. The moment came sooner than they expected. Harrison, drunk on the apparent success of his online attack, called a special meeting of the student council, of which he was president, to discuss artistic integrity issues in the talent show. He didn't know that Julian had been tipped off by Thomas, the boy who had been the first to stand up and applaud. In the large auditorium, the student council gathered with the school's administration. Harrison looked confident, impeccable in his custom blazer, while Principal Davies watched him with obvious admiration. We have evidence that certain participants have used inappropriate technical resources to artificially enhance their performances, Harrison began, casting a calculated glance at Julian, sitting silently in the back of the room. That's when the auditorium doors opened. It wasn't Seraphina Vance who entered as everyone, including Julian, had expected. It was a middle-aged black man wearing a simple but elegant suit. Mr. David King, multiple Grammy Award-winning music producer and Julian's godfather. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Mr. King said in a voice that was accustomed to commanding recording studios. "I was invited by Miss Costa to discuss possibilities for a partnership with Westmore's music program." Harrison blinked, confused. This wasn't the confrontation he had expected. "Mr. King." Principal Davies rose promptly, recognizing the renowned producer. "What an unexpected honor." "The honor is mine," Mr. King replied as he walked down the center aisle, "especially after watching this video that's been circulating. I was impressed by this young man's talent." The principal looked confused. "Video?" Ms. Costa turned on the projector. The screen did not show the defamatory montage of Harrison, but the original, unedited video of Julian's performance, including the moment when the lights flashed and the electronic beat invaded the performance. As a producer who has worked with talent for over 20 years, Mr. King continued, "I recognize raw talent when I see it. But what impressed me most was this." The image changed. It now showed Harrison and his friends storming the technical booth, clearly visible tampering with the equipment during Julian's performance. "Security cameras," Ms. Costa explained softly to the stunned director, "installed after last year's vandalism incident." Harrison paled. That's taken out of context." "And so is this?" Mr. King asked as the screen changed again. Now it showed screenshots of Harrison's messages planning not only the sabotage of the show but also the smear campaign. "Let's take down the black kid before anyone finds out he's better than us," one of the messages read. The auditorium fell deathly silent. "How did this?" Harrison stammered, searching the principal's face for support. "Your friend Thomas felt he needed to clear his conscience," Julian explained, finally speaking. "He handed everything over to Liam and Ms. Costa last night." Principal Davies looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Harrison, go to my office now." As Harrison staggered out, defeated, Mr. King turned to Julian with a smile. "So you never told them, did you?" Julian shook his head, a small smile forming. "Told them what?" asked Ms. Costa. Mr. King smiled more broadly. "That besides being the godson of a producer, Julian recorded an entire album in my studio last year. An album that's scheduled for release next month." Shock and understanding spread across everyone's faces. "It's true," Julian confirmed calmly. "I didn't want anyone to know. I wanted to be judged on my own merits, not my mother's name or connections." He glanced at the door through which Harrison had left in disgrace. "But now I think it's time for my music to be heard." And so what Harrison had planned as a final humiliation turned into the public revelation of a talent that the whole world would soon know, no longer as Seraphina Vance's son, but as Julian Vance, an artist in his own right. By the end of that day, 2 videos were circulating on the internet, one of Julian's incredible performance, and another of Harrison being escorted off campus, his humiliation permanently recorded for millions of viewers. Sometimes the cruelest jokes end up having the most unexpected and just endings. The Westmore Academy campus looked different that Monday morning. Notices about a special assembly were posted on all the bulletin boards. On the school's social media accounts, a formal statement announced changes to the Code of Conduct and anti-discrimination policies. In less than 72 hours, the scandal involving Harrison had transformed the institution. Julian arrived discreetly through the back, avoiding the curious glances and reporters crowding the main entrance. News of his impending album had leaked to the local press, attracting unexpected attention. "How does it feel to be the person who exposed decades of covert institutional racism?" Liam asked as they walked together to their first class. Julian adjusted his backpack like someone who just wanted to study in peace. In the principal's office, a tense meeting was underway. Principal Davies, now under investigation by the school board for negligence, stared nervously at the members of the disciplinary committee. The Harrison Reed case is not an isolated incident, said a newly hired consultant, hired to manage the crisis. Preliminary analysis of the recordings provided by Ms. Costa reveals a systematic pattern of protecting certain students. Outside Westmore Academy, Harrison's life was quickly falling apart. His early admission to Harvard was revoked. 3 elite universities that had accepted him reconsidered their offers. His father, a prominent executive, faced uncomfortable questions from shareholders about family values and social responsibility. Harrison was last seen leaving his parents' home with 2 suitcases, bound for a military school in Arizona. His Instagram account, once filled with photos of yachts and exclusive parties, was deactivated after a flood of negative comments. Meanwhile, Mr. King's studio was buzzing with activity. Julian, sitting in a leather swivel chair, listened to the final mixes of his album, Invisible Roots. "I always knew you had something special," Mr. King said, adjusting the equalizer, "but what happened at that school, it brought a depth to your performance that wasn't there before." "Life experience," Julian replied with a slight smile. His phone vibrated. It was a message from his mother, Seraphina, who was finally returning from her world tour. "Proud doesn't begin to describe how I feel. I'll be there tomorrow. I love you." She had watched the original video of Julian's performance over 100 times, she confessed later. "I saw you turn their hatred into art," she said when they finally met. "That's what great artists do." The following month, Julian's return to Westmore Academy was different. The hallways were no longer filled with muffled laughter or condescending glances. In their place was cautious respect, perhaps even admiration. Thomas, Harrison's former ally, who had provided the crucial evidence, now greeted him in the hallways. Other students, once silent accomplices, sought redemption with gestures of inclusion. Principal Davies was replaced by Vice Principal Garcia, a progressive educator who immediately launched a privilege and diversity awareness program. Ms. Costa was promoted to head of the art department. "You know what's ironic?" Julian remarked to her during a counseling session. "Harrison wanted to expose me as just the son of the famous singer, but he ended up freeing me from that label forever." The release of the album Invisible Roots took place on a spring afternoon. No big parties or extravaganzas, just an intimate event at Mr. King's studio with the people who really mattered. Seraphina Vance was there, watching proudly from a corner as her son gave a short speech. "This album was born out of a need to be seen beyond labels," Julian explained to those in attendance. "When we sing, we are not defined by our color, our family, or our past. We are defined by the truth we bring to every note." The reviews were unanimous. Julian Vance wasn't just Seraphina Vance's son, he was an artist with his own authentic and powerful voice. 3 months after its release, the album received 2 Grammy nominations, including Best New Artist. In an interview with Rolling Stone, when asked about Harrison and the incident at school, Julian responded with a serenity that surprised the interviewer, "I don't thank him for the prejudice or the humiliation, no one should have to go through that. But I do thank him for giving me the opportunity to face the fear that was holding me back from being completely who I am. Harrison wanted to show me my place, and ironically, that's exactly what he did. It just wasn't the place he imagined." Westmore Academy transformed the former talent show into an annual festival of roots, officially named in honor of the song Julian sang on that fateful day. The event became one of the most prestigious among schools in the region, attracting diverse talent from across the country. At his graduation performance 3 years later, Julian Vance returned to the Westmore Academy stage as a special guest. The irony was not lost on anyone, the same stage that should have been his public humiliation now welcomed him as a legend. Before singing his last song, he shared a reflection, "We all face moments when other people try to define who we are and what we are capable of. In those moments, we have a choice, to accept their definition, or respond with our own truth. And that truth, when finally found, has a power that no prejudice can silence." If this story of transformation and justice touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that show how sometimes the greatest triumphs are born from the cruelest situations. Share in the comments if you've ever experienced a moment when someone tried to diminish your value and how you responded, because the most powerful lesson from Julian Vance's story isn't that talent eventually beats prejudice, it's that when we know our true worth, no one else has the power to define it.